Wasn't gonna be, I was gonna push the chair out of the way.
Yeah, he'll be here, he said.
Okay.
He can sit over there in the corner.
Yeah, I'm gonna put him in the corner anyway, yeah.
All right. We are on.
Recording in progress.
All right, good evening. It is 7 p.m. on Thursday, January 25th, 2024. I'm calling the Lunenburg Finance Committee to order. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel and on Facebook Live on the Public Access Facebook page. The following information is provided for members of the public that would like to participate in the meeting remotely. To participate remotely from a computer, please use the link attached to the agenda, which is posted on the town calendar website. From a telephone, dial the toll-free number 888-475-4499 and enter webinar ID 898-7675-2952. If you've not registered with Zoom, you'll be asked for your name and email address. Note participant ID is needed. Just press pound when asked. Telephone users may dial *9 to request to speak after joining the meeting. Computer and app users may use the raise hand feature to request to speak. This agenda lists all topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by open meeting law. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any announcements from anyone on the committee? Perfect. Another quick meeting. The only announcements that I have for this evening are just to plug the planned Lunenburg public meeting happening on February 1st, 2024 at the Adult Activity Center. The survey number 2 that was passed around has, the due date has expired on that one, so our consultants are currently getting the data and compiling all of that to present to the town at 2 identical sessions on the 1st of February. The first one will be at 4 p.m., the second one will be at 6:30 p.m., and we'll move forward from there, and there will be a third survey coming out shortly thereafter. The only other announcement that I have is that this meeting is a little bit unorthodox for the Finance Committee. We typically don't have question and answer sessions in the middle of, or the prelim of a budget season, but given the scenario that's been the preliminary budget that's been presented and the revised preliminary budget that's been presented at the school committee meetings, and the confusion I think that's out there by the town residents about the process and the proper channels to work through and how to get to a acceptable end are needing to be addressed, I think. So I wanted to pull this together just to have an information session and a chance for anyone in the public to ask general questions. I'm going to state this multiple times. We are not the school committee, and we are certainly not the select board. We are also not the town manager. We are the finance committee, and it is our task to be the legislative body, or to represent the legislative body outside of town meeting. It is our task to look through the budget presented by the select board and the town manager, and to offer recommendations. It's also our responsibility at town meeting to speak to the town budget, or the proposed budget, but we certainly do not hold authority over the town budget. We certainly do not hold authority over any of the committees or boards or manager that actually does work, does actually come up with the budget itself. So with that, I'm going to move, we're going to do it, I'm going to have a public comment first, which is historically, it's an opportunity for the committee first to speak. After that, it's an opportunity for the public to speak. Typically, it's just a one-way dialogue in this instance. So if you are looking to have a conversation, please save that for the new business under the public question and answer, although I'm happy to take notes and address them when we get to that point as well. for public comment, I would ask again that you stay within roughly 3 minutes. We'll have a timer going if necessary. I've asked Tiffany to do that as our newly elected clerk, just to try and keep the meeting moving along. Other than that, those are the announcements that I have, and let's move on into public comment. Is there any public comment from the committee tonight? Mr.
Dave
Passios.
Passios, member of this committee, 56 Whiting Street, Lunenburg. A couple of weeks ago, I made a board comment, and at that time, I was talking about this exact process that we're in right now. This is, again, one of those very challenging years. There's a lot of unknowns. There's changing numbers almost on a daily basis, and I understand the emotion behind what's going on right now. Hopefully, this is not where we're going to be when we get to the end of the process, but it might be. I was pleased that the school committee adamantly stated that they knew they were coming into issues this year with the ESSER grant money sunsetting, but they did not expect the increases in other areas that exacerbate this problem. We're actually starting to see some issues on the town side also. So it's going to be a difficult year for not only the school district, but for the town also. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Any public comment from the public? Anyone who's on Zoom that would like to speak, just use the raise hand feature and we can call on you that way. All right, seeing none, we'll move along to just...
Got one now.
Oh, just kidding, sorry. Mr. Sullivan, feel free to unmute.
Can he unmute?
That's a good question.
There we go. Sorry, I was trying to get back. I'm on my phone, so I was trying to get back to the unmute function.
Nope.
I attended the school committee, Chris Sullivan, 108 Highland Street. I attended the school committee meeting last night to start learning a little more about kind of FY25. Obviously we're hearing cuts that are going to be, regardless of where they fall, they're all going to be detrimental to our students, to our teachers, to the school community. It's going to be, these are going to be cuts that are going to force others, who, within the school district that are already doing so much, to pick up the slack and do even more. I think these cuts are things that are going to hit the social and emotional learning of our kids, of our teachers, and of concern, and hopefully FinCom can maybe provide guidance and so forth if it's within your purview. The future concern for FY 2026 and 27 as well. Hearing some things in the meeting last night and then doing a little more research myself afterwards, just some things to note, I guess. According to NISH, Lunenburg School District ranks within the top 25% of Massachusetts school districts that NISH has rated. U.S. News and World Report ranks our high school number 67 out of 405 here in Massachusetts. Our school district hits these high ranks despite the fact that we're in the bottom 10% of the average per student expenditure and the bottom 25% of net school spend above the Chapter 70 foundation budget. So bottom 25% of both of those. Imagine how the town's academic potential, could be what it could be if we decided to really truly invest in our kids. Our schools have been great. We have 2 kids in the school system. Our schools have been great. They should continue to shine here in our town. They're a big factor here, obviously, with our property values. They're one of the driving forces that make Lunenburg a highly desirable place to live. Attending a recent master plan committee meeting, we're learning that Lunenburg is one of the, I think they said, the 3rd fastest growing community in our state. As such, I think it's our responsibility to properly fund our schools and continue to make that a top priority here. We pay a premium in property taxes We spend, our family alone spends $1,000 to $1,500 a year in athletic fees at the school. We should not be looking at our kids taking this hit. The rising costs that we're all seeing, across everything here, I think 2.5% budget increase is just not going to cut it. There's discussions already here, obviously, with respects to an override to deal with school funding issues and so forth. I'm somewhat hesitant in that, and I'm hoping that by, hopefully maybe we can, these, committees can come and work with FinCom. People can come together here to work collaboratively to see what we can do within the existing town budget to trim some fat, share some resources, and fund our schools effectively. And I'd encourage FinCom, I guess, if there are things that we can do as citizens in the town to point us in the right direction, help us out, and tell us what we should be doing to try and make this come together. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment from the public? All right, seeing none, we have a small amount of regular business to get to, but we will go through it rather quickly. Moving on to old business, our liaisons from last week, I actually received an email from Ms. Emke about the Board of Assessors and us wanting to potentially put a liaison on the Board of Assessors, since that is a direct financial impact to the town, considering that's where we get about 2/3 of our income. So I wanted to see if there was anybody that would be willing to be the Board of Assessors liaison. Does anybody have time early in the day? Their meetings are usually at lunchtime.
Yeah, I couldn't do it lunchtime.
Okay, I will hold on to it for now. If anybody feels like doing it, we can, please feel free to reach out.
Maybe Tom can. I don't know.
Oh, that's right, by default, right? He's not here? Can't say no. All right, moving on to new business. The school committee budget discussion. So, again, I wanted to have a finance committee point person that people in the public can kind of reach out to directly, rather than just kind of sending emails off into the theoretical void and hoping that one of us gets back to it, and that way we can actually have a directed response, a more kind of uniform response, and someone to communicate between the public and ourselves as well. And Jean had actually offered to do that by email earlier this week, so if anybody has any other desire to do that as well, I'm happy to have Jean be our point person, unless anybody else would specifically like to. Happy to have a discussion.
Well, I guess I'd like a discussion on it.
Sure.
If it's simply like the default person to send in a question to, that's one thing. But I do feel that all of us should be open towards any member of the town to reach out to us, because for whatever reason they feel most comfortable with us. So I guess I'm a little, coming into tonight when you put this on the agenda, I wasn't quite sure what it would mean, but if that's kind of the sole thing, then maybe I'm okay with that. I know, like, I don't know if we're looking to put a page together or something like that, but, I guess I'm not sure the message it sends. Because I think we should all be open towards.
Of course. Yes, I'm not suggesting that none of us have the ability to have the public reach out to us. My goal here is just to have kind of a general central focus to kind of point down to and narrow things down to. If there's sort of general question, maintaining kind of the conversation, bringing the kind of coalescing everything together, bringing it forward to us as a group, rather than having, oh, I received this email, but I didn't receive this email. That way, any emails that we receive, we can kind of pass on to Ms. Russell as well, and say, or CC Ms. Russell, since it wouldn't violate open meeting law to just have the two people in that. And that way we kind of have someone that has seen sort of all of the correspondence that's been around. not specifically to speak on behalf of the Finance Committee directly, but at least to, rather than, it's more just kind of to centralize the information, rather than have it spread throughout kind of thinly.
So I guess if someone reached out to me personally and wanted to have correspondence, and get advice and understanding and all that, I don't think I would be inclined to send it to one other person on the board, so, I don't know, I kind of feel this is kind of an odd position, or role, but, I don't know.
I have a question, actually. Ms. Russell, what does that position mean to you?
To me, it would mean getting a greater understanding of what people in town expect, what they are concerned about, being able to share with all of you what their issues are, and again, just gaining a greater understanding of the people in our town.
I think that is a positive aspect to having somebody that's gathering information, because, you know, we are all volunteers and many of us have a lot of other things that we're doing during the day, but we all feel it's important enough to sit on this board and understand town law and policy and answer questions for the town. And the way that I see this is we're here to advise on what is exactly what you've said before. You know, when we opened the meeting, or when you opened the meeting up to say, this is our position, we do not have any decision-making, we're here to advise and review and analyze what we currently have in our town for materials and share that with people. So if there is one point person that's willing to consolidate that information, I think that would be a positive aspect to it. Having said that, you know, if that becomes overwhelming because there is a lot of correspondence coming in, I think it would be easy to just communicate that and say, okay, we all need to shift gears here and jump in and, you know, participate in answering questions. But I also agree with what Mr. Menard said about if someone is emailing us directly because they have more comfortability with one person over the other, I think it's our responsibility to correspond.
Far better said than I was saying. Thank you.
I think if nothing else, at least there's with a point person, hopefully nobody's emails fall through the cracks and they get an acknowledgement. That's been a problem over the years with many committees. Okay, so who's going to respond to this person that just sent an email to the entire commission or the body or whatever, and all of a sudden, either nobody responded or everybody responded individually. And you know, in this particular case, I don't think there's a need for that. But as you said, there's no reason in the world why, if somebody's more comfortable with one person than another, rather than a blanket email to the Finance Committee group, send it to that individual. That's fine. It's still allowed.
Okay, I mean, I like that case. I do get concerned about being the central point that collects all information that is being said by any individual one of us, because I wonder if that kind of gets into a deliberation outside of open meeting, but I guess responding to emails is certainly like yeah, you be the one person that responds, make sure every email is responded to in one way or another so that people don't feel like it's falling on deaf. I do understand that. So I wouldn't have a problem with that aspect of it.
Okay. That was sort of my intentionality at the beginning as well. It's just, I know that I've received a handful of emails. I'm sure that people have received a handful of emails as well. I finally managed to respond back to all of mine. But as Mr. Passio said, I'm sure that there would be some that would fall through the cracks. I don't get that many emails, so it's not that hard to respond to them. But if this continues to get larger, then there's a chance that we may end up having more emails. And I want to make sure that the public is promptly responded back to with accurate information.
I agree, and thank you for offering and
Yeah,
having the
thank you.
capacity to do that.
All right.
I think it's important to say many, many times over through this next few weeks too, as you said at the beginning of the meeting, we do not develop the school department budget. That is the school committee and the superintendent. We're just here to allow people to voice their opinions. The school committee is listening. There are a couple members here. So it's a back and forth for communication more than anything.
All right. So moving along, before we get into the question and answer session, I have a presentation I wanted to kind of go through for the town's benefit. Again, my goal for this evening is to have a stamp on a meeting that we can reference back to say at this meeting we can direct people to say, here's where town revenue comes from, here's the budgeting process, and these are when all these questions were asked and answered, so that way we can direct people to this specific meeting rather than say, I think there was a meeting sometime in March that I don't know, the sewer commission had where they talked about something. And so for that reason, I want to present this town revenue and Prop 2.5 presentation. Let me pull it up first. Okay, so this is something that I presented just about a year ago, actually, that I've updated substantially for this evening's purpose, and I'm happy to send this out to anybody that would like it at this point. The Finance Committee all has this. I think I uploaded the most recent version. The one in your email is already outdated, so on the drive is the most recent version. But this is just an idea to kind of go over the process of bringing revenue into the town. And there were a whole bunch of questions last year about Prop 2.5 and how that works and how taxes are done and the levy process and whether the town was given a windfall of cash or not. So quickly enough, just going through revenue, levy, overrides, debt exclusions, cap outlay expenditures, and then some general takeaways. I'm going to use numbers from 2 years ago, FY22, just because the FY23 numbers, to my knowledge, have not been certified completely yet, or I don't have them all in certified form. So this was our total revenue that we took in, $47.3 million in FY22. Of that, our levy made up about 63.5%, just under $30 million. That's taxes from the citizens of Lunenburg specifically. We also had cherry sheet and cherry sheet offset, state aid, that makes up another 20%. That's your Chapter 70 funding, your Chapter 40 funding. That's all of that fun stuff. We have local receipts, your excise taxes, your parking tickets, your speeding tickets, all of those. And then we have some other ones, which is free cash, reimbursements, trust funds, reserve funds, and enterprise funds as well. This is how we pay for day-to-day activities out of the water and sewer department and whatnot. Those are done out of enterprise funds. So all in all, this is kind of the breakdown of our, no, Pac has that one. Pac, if we could make the, minimize the Zoom windows, if possible. Okay. Maybe at some point. So this is just the breakdown in a little more graphical form of where we get all of our money. Predominantly, we're pulling money in from the levy itself. There are some rules. So actually, this is new, so I apologize. I took a look at the cherry sheet and the state funding. So these are, Lunenburg is right here in the center of this. Lunenburg is here in the center. This is FY24 on the left, and the rough estimate from the state for what FY25 is going to be. It's not a hard number yet or anything. But moving left to right is an increase in enrollment or student enrollment within these specific towns. Now, these towns are vastly different. They are not all the same town for sure. They have different incomes, as you can see. Some of them getting far more aid, some of them getting far fewer aid. What I'm looking at here is more just drawing attention to us being kind of right in the middle, and that the surrounding towns in terms of student enrollment, all saw very similar increases, which are basically just the required increase, the step increase from a Chapter 70 funding. So I know there's a push to reach out to your state legislators, and this would be the reason why, because it's not just us. There's a lot of other towns and the municipalities that are in the state that are also in the same kind of boat where nobody's really getting a windfall of cash from Chapter 70, unfortunately. And to go a little deeper, it is a very complicated formulation. It takes into account a foundational budget, and then it takes into account a local contribution. And there's 6 actual factors that are even further broken down. To get into further detail, I have links on a presentation and a white paper if anybody wants those. Feel free. It's a lot to get into. But it gets through everything, and you can have a much better understanding as to where the Chapter 70 funds are actually coming from. So then we get into taxes. So our levy. So there is a Proposition 2.5 that was put forward in 1980. And the idea here is it gives you the maximum amount that you can possibly levy per year on assessed property values. And you have a ceiling to that, which is 2.5% of your full total assessed value. So for example, if the town has $1 billion worth of property, the levy ceiling is 25 million. You cannot go above that, even if you did an override. That's it. You can go to that level and no further. Below that, you have the limit, and this is the maximum amount that a town can levy its members every year. And it increases by 2.5% every year, plus new growth, plus debt exclusions and capital exclusions. So for example, again, these are made up numbers, and in imaginary FY12, the levy limit was $10 million. Your 2.5% increase is 250. New growth, let's say there was some new construction of 50,000, and you have some debt exclusion where you're still paying off for 200,000, which means the next year's levy limit is $500,000 more. It's not a substantial increase, and this gets back to last year when, yes, the assessments went through the roof, but we were still limited into the cap as to how much money we could levy. It just was spread differently throughout the town. The levy itself is generated by both real and property taxes. It cannot surpass the levy limit without a town vote and a ballot question vote. And if valuations increase, then the levy rate must decrease to keep the levy under the levy limit. So that's the number set, recommended by the Board of Assessors and set by the Select Board as to how much per $1,000 we pay in taxes to keep us within the levy limit. Now for the good stuff, the overrides. So overrides exist, but they have to be voted on. They're the only way that you can get over the levy limit, but you can only raise it up to the levy ceiling itself. So that 10.5 million up to 25 million for your imaginary numbers. You could only go up to the 25 million. To do so, it requires a town vote. Beyond that, it requires a ballot question being placed onto an election, on a town election. That has to be done by the Select Board. The only way that you can get a ballot question onto the ballot is to have the Select Board have a majority vote by the Select Board. This is a permanent increase as well. So this is not a one-time deal. Once you do an override, that is the new levy limit, and you will have the next year you can go up by another 2.5%, unless you do an underride, which you can do in another town meeting if you'd like. There's debt exclusions. Those are ways you can pay off large expenses like our buildings. There's capital exclusions. We don't currently have any of those, so we don't really need to worry about those. Now, DLS, the Department of Revenue and the Department of Local Services, is a fantastic resource for anyone that's looking to get a lot more information onto any of this. I have their link down below. For example, this is Lunenburg's all the way back to fiscal year 2013. This is our assessed values, our limits, what we actually levied at, our override capacity, and our ratios. I am an analytical chemist by profession, so I apologize in advance. I did a lot of deep diving into numbers here, but charts or graphs to me are much more clear and concise. So I did an analysis of the DOR's analysis. I looked at the assessed value versus the levy. So we're looking on the kind of bottom graph here. This is the assessed value in billions of dollars on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, it's the actual levy that was done from 2013 through 2022 in millions of dollars. The takeaways, oh, and there's one point up here, which is 2023. I'm leaving that off of all data because it's an anomalous peak. Property values increased, I think, 21%. So I left that off of the chart for this reason. So what the takeaway here is that our assessed value trend is actually increasing at a parabolic rate. It's much faster than the actual levies that we're doing, which makes sense because we're restricted by Prop 2.5. We have a step limit that we can do. We cannot increase above the step limit automatically. But it's a linear trend. The problem here is that we are surpassing our assessed value is far outpacing our levy limit, our tax levy increase. Put another way, a year-over-year change. This is even worse news. Year over year, the assessed value change is trending from 2014 to 2022. That's this kind of reddish one here, or the maroonish one. On the average, our assessed values are obviously increasing, year-to-year percentage differences. Yes, there's some ups and downs, but on the whole, it's increasing by just about 1%. On the contrary, and these are our assessed values over the last 3 years. The increase is year over year, 106 million, 80 million, 114 million. That's just increased property value or new construction value or whatnot within the town itself. Contrary, the year over year levy change has actually been trending down for the past decade by about 1/3%. There's an anomalous year here in 2016, which, if we look here, you can kind of see it's just this little blip right here. That's why I like this graph. It's expanded out so you can actually see the difference a little bit better. But removing that anyways, you're still in a slight downward trend. It may not be 1/3%, but it's still flat, if not slightly down. And for example, in 2020, our levy increase was 1.1 million. 2021 was 837,000, and 2022 was just over 1 million as well. And I think the easiest way to see it is when you compare the tax levy as a percentage of the assessed value. What this is showing from 2013 to 2022 is that we have an increasing trend for the first 4 years, or first 5 years, from 2023 to 2013 to 2017. Levy was outpacing the assessed value, which means that we had more available revenue during a smaller growth period. Then after 2017, and since then, our trend has been the opposite. We have been increasing assessed value, and it's been outpacing the levy, which means we are now sitting in a position where we have less available revenue during a larger growth period. So my takeaway from these is that we have the value in the homes, and we have the tax levy as it is because it's 2.5%, but there is room in there to potentially do more with it. What the town decides to do with it, that's up to the town itself. But these are the numbers that we have. Overall takeaways that I have, again, the town is generating its revenue. 2/3 of it's coming from the levy itself directly. Our new growth and our debt exclusions, sorry, that should be debt exclusions, and the 2.5% increase is how we get our levy. An override exists. The process for it starts with in theory, would start with a warrant article on the town meeting floor, unless the select board does something. You could have a warrant article, you could have an amendment, but basically there needs to be a vote at town meeting to say that there has been an override or an override is requested. It needs to be, and I'll draw notice to this second line here, dollar terms and purpose of the override are required. You cannot just say, we want to override for $5 million. It can't be that opaque. It's got to be very specific. It's this amount of money for this purpose. If it's approved at town meeting, it then goes to effectively the select board, and the select board has the authority to put the question on the ballot, like I said. They have the authority to not put the question on the ballot. It's entirely up to the select board. At that point, though, if a question is put on the ballot, it would go to a town vote, and it's just a simple majority at that point. And if it's granted, that's the end of the story. An override is passed, and we reassess the levy at that point. Interestingly, in 2019, the city of Norwood, or town of Norwood, Massachusetts, actually did a levy override themselves. for a very similar reason. They were in a hole, about $5 million with their school department. And interestingly, they did pretty much the exact same thing here that we're, at least that some people in town have started discussing. I would urge people to go to this link. I'm happy to send it out as well. It's from Norwood themselves, kind of detailing exactly what process they went through and why they did it and where they did it. And then it passed with overwhelming support, and there was an actual Boston Globe article on it as well. The assessor's portion, this is kind of harkening back to last year, that it's not 2.5% on everyone's property, it's spread throughout the town as a whole, and that it's based on the individual valuations, property to property. And then there's additional resources. I have the Prop 2.5 primer from the state, that's a very good resource as well, and DLS in general, like I said, is an exceptional resource. So I know that's a ton of information, but it's out there. I want to make sure it's here. I'm happy to first off take any questions from the committee or comments from the committee, and then we can certainly open this up to a further discussion. Mr. Passios.
Asking as a question for information because I don't remember this clearly, but I'll state what I believe and then somebody can correct me. What you just stated for an override and needing to state what the override is specifically for in the year that it's voted. Subsequent years after that, it becomes part of the revenue or part of the levy of the town. So it can be moved around anywhere in the budget after year one.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. You have to justify the override to begin with, but once the override is done, in following years, it just gets rolled into the levy capacity.
Right.
At the discretion of the town manager and then the town to vote it, to appropriate it,
Yeah, the levy limit is permanently increased at that point.
unless you do an underride.
Well, yeah, which
But the key to that, and it's come up in other attempts for overrides for other reasons, and I won't say whether they were less important or more important than what we're facing right now, was that, okay, you're going to get the money to do X, Y, Z this year. If we give you that, though, it's not going to necessarily go to X, Y, Z next year and subsequent years. And that's one of the, when you have a group against an override, that's usually one of the things that they bring up.
Correct. Correct. And then there is another, apparently in the works, there's a, so while there is requirement at this point to do an underride to drop the levy, there's in the legislature, it's getting passed or pushed forward at this point. It's just been from the governor herself to change the override law a little bit to allow for temporary overrides, which I think may be addressing that exact question.
Right.
So this past Monday, she dropped her Municipal Empowerment Act. And in there is a section on override. So in about a year or so, this could be all moot, at least the override and the underride portion of it.
Right.
Any other questions, comments from the committee at this point?
We have a comment on October 28th of 2021. We had a presentation given to us about Chapter 70 and the complex formula that goes into it. So if anyone wants to go on YouTube, search on that, and if anyone can understand it, you can have my seat on this board immediately. It is confusing. But anyways, it is important it's probably an important video to watch because we do not get as much Chapter 70 funding as other towns. And the reasons for it are kind of laid out in that presentation and in the details of it. And it gets into things like how many ESL students do you have and, all sorts of things. So anyways, it's about a 2-hour video. It's interesting if you want to start to understand how finances work and how the town works. Just one other little nit, I think the town, the select board has to vote on the ballot prior to town meeting. So they would actually have to vote to put it on the ballot, and then the increase would have to pass, the allocation of the funds would have to pass at the town meeting, and then 50 plus one, 50% of the people would have to vote to approve an override.
I couldn't find anything in the charter or MGL that said that explicitly. Everything I said was kind of kept them separate. And
Yeah.
the thinking I had behind that was anyone at town meeting can put an amendment in.
Yeah, the only one that can put it on the ballot is the select board. I did get I did see something that was like in 2017, exactly how to do this. And like I said, this is the exact wording that needs to go in it. It's kind of laid out on that. But again, I think it's important to note that it cannot be done by citizens petition.
Correct.
A debt exclusion could, an override cannot.
Correct.
An override or an underride. So select board, 3/5 of the select board would need to agree with this to put it on the ballot.
And I would like to stress that it's at least my feeling that an override is more of a last scenario option. It's January 25th. Our town meeting isn't until May 4th. And the warrant doesn't close until March 18th. So there is still time. We are still, theoretically, we're still quite early in our budget process. The superintendent has, in the last week, given 2 proposed budgets. That is not the end of their process. Typically, there are public hearings that they go through, there's question and answer sessions that they go through, and then eventually it will get disseminated down to us in the next 2 months. But again, my goal is just to have people know what the options are, depending upon how the next 2 months go. But as far as I'm concerned, I think there are other ways that we should consider looking at other solutions we should consider ahead of just immediately going override. We need to go do an override immediately because, well, I think someone said it well last night, is there the political climate for that in town? And that's a tough question. Any other questions or comments from the committee before we open it up?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. Things I've heard, et cetera, and maybe there'll be time throughout this question and answer. I think the first thing what town folks should do is get involved and get up to speed on how things work. Information will start to be transmitted. We kind of talked about that a few times here. Some information is just frankly not available yet. The governor's budget has not been, or she just recently, I guess, maybe today, established it. The House needs to pass it, et cetera. So that information is just starting to trickle out. We haven't gotten our cherry sheet yet, or if we have, it hasn't even been presented to Select Board and Finance Committee. So again, there's a lot of information that's going to come out over these next few weeks. I think what town folks should do is continue to go to school committee meetings, continue to be patient and respectful during them. They should be involved in our meetings. We have public hearings by charter that we have to have, and often it's 1 or 2 people in the audience, one of which is here tonight. But people got to get involved in it. It is I think it's a transparent process if you follow it. And the major ones is, school committee needs to put together 60% of the budget, and they do so with the school committee and the superintendent. This year, we've asked kind of for some incremental discussions through us, maybe even between the town side of the budget and the school side of the budget, so that big level discussions can occur. Not the nitty-gritty stuff that the school committee and the superintendent will be doing, but that sort of thing. And then finally, if we are stuck, quote, stuck with the 2.5% increase plus new growth, I just want everyone to understand that, DPW, your roads, your snow removal, your police and your fire, we've spent a lot of money getting those services to have full EMT capabilities in town. All of those, libraries, et cetera, right? It's a holistic approach that we need to take here, and, you know, the only way for schools to get from 2.5% to 2.6% is that the town side of it goes from 2.5 to 2.4. And maybe this year that makes sense, but it's something that the town, you know, has to, you know, listen to the presentations and be part of the discussion as we go through. So, I encourage and I hope that we have, you know, this many people at all the finance committee meetings throughout the year. And I think you'll find that, you know, this body has historically allowed for comments and questions, you know, throughout the meetings, and I would hope that we, you know, intend to do that again. There's public comment before presentations and after presentations. So that's what I think town folks should do. That's all I had.
All right. So just a couple ground rules before we let the floodgates open. We do have members of the school committee, both in the building and on Zoom, it looks like, and we have members of the select board in the building as well. I would ask that so this is a finance committee meeting. We do not have a quorum for the other two committees or boards. So any questions sort of directed their way is at my discretion. It would need to be through me to one of them. And as far as I'm concerned, they have every right not to want to answer something if they don't want to, but I'm happy to take note of it and to pass it along to them, and they can kind of deliberate and possibly get back to someone specifically that way. I'm looking for this to be a constructive conversation and asking question session. There is public comment coming up later again, so if there are something that you would just like to say, feel free to say that at the end of the meeting as well. And again, I'm asking people to hold their questions and comments to about 3 minutes. And that's 3 minutes of your time, not 3 minutes of our time answering you. So if our answer lasts 5 minutes, then you still have time. With that, I would ask if there are any questions. If there's anyone on Zoom that has questions, please just use the raise hand feature. If there's anyone in the audience that has questions, come on up.
Rhonda Licio, 181 Reservoir Road. I had a question regarding, I actually thought the superintendent did a really good job last night describing that achievement is the primary goal, and that clearly we can't afford to fund all the things that we want. And I actually, one of the public commenters was, well, more than one, was really against the possibility of removing the athletic program director, the trainer, and I think the secretary position were possible items. And some of the comments claimed that half of the student population is involved in the school athletic programs. And that, I think that's incorrect. I think the athletic programs are only available from grades 6 through 12. And and I want to say it's around 48% of the students in grades 6 through 12 participate in school sports. And if you consider, I'm imagining that some of those athletes participate in more than one sport. So I guess I'd like to know the exact number of students who benefit from the athletic program versus focusing more on the academics, which reach every student. Thanks.
Thank you. So for that one, I don't know if we're going to have a direct answer for.
I think we should pass that on to the
Yep,
school
I would-
and
I would-
ask them to answer it as part of this.
Exactly. I would imagine that the school committee doesn't have that number offhand as well. But I will, Ms. Archambault is also on the call. I will follow up with her as well to get an answer for you for that one. All right, are there any questions from online? This may be a fast meeting after all.
You got one?
We do. Mandy Gilman, feel free, please unmute.
Hi. Thank you, actually, Mr. Waters, for that great presentation. It was very helpful to hear more about the budgeting process and the levy. I'm hoping you can help us get some clarity. I know there was some expression that maybe the Prop 2.5 wasn't the way we were going to go, or that we weren't. I'm going to back up. That may not be the recommendation at some point, but I would like some clarity on what the process is. So I'm hoping you can help us reach out to town council to see whether that, what the different options for that would be.
I had trouble hearing, did you?
So are you asking like what the process is for overriding Prop 2.5 or just for?
Yes, exactly. So whether, I just think we need to know exactly what the process is, whether the select board has to initiate it or whether it can be initiated by citizen petition at town meeting.
So there's two parts of the process. The first part is that it has to be on a town ballot. It has to be a question on a town ballot. And the only way to get a question on the town ballot is from the select board to have a majority vote to put a question on the town ballot. The town cannot do that. You cannot petition to put a question on the town ballot, on the ballot. So without that, there is no override. The first part, though, that has to happen is a little bit more murky, and that happens at town meeting itself.
Okay.
So the budget is presented by the select board and the town manager at town meeting. And that is a recommended budget from the executive. It is still up to the town to actually appropriate those funds and to accept that levy and that amount. Anybody that wants to on town meeting floor can amend just about anything they want within the scope of any of the warrant articles. And that includes changing the budget, either up or down. That has to then be accepted by the town council and the town moderator as within the scope. So let's say instead of 47 million, we budgeted 55 million for whatever reason, or 30 million. That would be allowed, in theory. That should be allowed. That amendment has to be approved first by the town, so a vote will take place on whether or not to amend the article. And then once if that's approved, it then goes to the town itself again, and they vote on the budget with the new number in there. Once that's approved, that's the budget. That's what it is. We potentially leave town meeting with either a budget that is higher than we have the capability of levying to, or we leave town meeting with a budget that is under what we've levied, or we leave the town meeting with something kind of close. And the murkiness kind of comes with what Mr. Menard was talking about is does the select board already have to have the question on the ballot ahead of that, kind of anticipating an override coming? And that I can check with town council on to see exactly when they have to do that.
I do not think we could change the warrant article to go above the levy limit without having something prepared for the ballot. I think one thing we can do, as maybe an example, is if we go in and the town overwhelmingly feels that the schools need an extra $100,000, and this town overwhelmingly thinks that that should come from Town Department X. And I won't say what X is, it's one of the other departments. The town, during the presentation of the budget, can put holds on those items, discuss it, and change those amounts as part of the town meeting process. But I do not think you could put it over the levy limit in appropriation. But I do think that that portion of the discussion should be clarified by town manager, town council, perhaps, town moderator, whomever, but.
I spoke with the town manager earlier this evening. We can leave town meeting with an overfunded budget. With an underfunded budget.
Underfunded, I can understand.
As in, like, we do not have the money for the budget that's been approved. And the result of that is that we have subsequent special town meetings until we have a budget that's balanced,
Okay,
which could at that point then take into account an override.
okay.
And I believe also that there is a clock that starts ticking once an override article is passed. There is a window of opportunity for it to get onto a ballot. So in many cases, if this was done out of cycle, say in a special town meeting, then a special election has to be called within X number of days.
Madam Town Manager?
I was just going to add that what you said, it would have to be within the scope of the article, and that would be a decision made by the moderator, who usually consults town council in making that call and then entertaining the vote. But it's possible to leave town meeting with an unbalanced budget, but we would have to have a balanced budget before setting the tax rate in the fall.
Mr. Beardmore?
Thank you.
So we could.
What you just described is completely news to me. I was always under the impression, my name is Peter Beardmore, 282 Pleasant Street. I'm a member of the school committee. I'm speaking on behalf of myself only. What you just described is news to me. That was not my understanding, and I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. I tend to believe I'm wrong, given the town manager's explanation. However, I believe that there's probably a cleaner way to do this, and my recollection of when this has been done in the past is that there has been a separate article on the warrant written with the language as prescribed by statute or the DOR or whatever, that is basically an override article. And what has traditionally been done in the past is that if there is an override article on the warrant and the select board preemptively puts an override question on the ballot, this can be taken care of within a 2-week period, because our election follows town meeting by 2 weeks. And I do believe, to your point, Mr. Passios, that there is an expiration as well. So if town meeting passes it and the select board has not put the item on a ballot, they can call a special election within a certain amount of time. And it's not a long period of time, is my recollection. The reason why that's cleaner is that we're not going into the summer with an unbalanced budget, and you have executive boards needing to determine how to actually, put resources into place relative to appropriations that we're not really sure that we have. So my preference would be to not pass an underfunded budget if we go down this path, and I commented last night, I don't think that that's the right path for us right now. That's just my personal opinion. But if we go down that path, I think that there's a cleaner path and the other thing, though, just to echo the question of the previous commenter, I would like that some sort of opinion from town council, because the other thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is if we were to go down the path that you described and the moderator decides that it's out of order, then the whole thing's all said and done, and it's literally one man's vote. And I'd rather not be in that situation either.
You
Thank
took the words out of my mouth. That was my second point I was getting to. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. So that's the murky way. The cleaner way would be if there would be a town petition to get a warrant article in for an override. And that is done, the warrant articles are currently open. They opened and they will close again on March 18th. And all that requires would be, as far as I know, and please, select board members, if I'm mistaken here, correct me if I'm wrong, that's just a simple a citizen petition with a number of signatures required and the language as needed, which would kind of get to the town council's recommendation or a DLS kind of boilerplate statement to get that as a warrant article directly on the town warrant for our town meeting. At that point, then it gets taken up, and it would likely be taken up, I would assume, ahead of the actual omnibus budget, because it would directly affect that one. But that would be the way to get it directly onto the warrant. People in town would have the ability to read the warrant booklet itself and have a chance to kind of see supplemental information. That way it would not be something that would be kind of dropped at town meeting at the 11th hour and not be well vetted and be much less messy, I think. But I will check, Mandy, with town council just to get the exact process and ask if it does need to have a select board approved vote or a ballot question ready to go as well ahead of town meeting.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your help.
Of course. Any other comments on that question?
No, I mean, I would echo what Peter says, that I would like to think that if we were, as a town, considering a 2.5 override, that it would be well thought out and well warranted, meaning purposely put into the warrant article in a fashion that it is success or failure at the ballot box, not town meeting, but at the vote, would make it so that we continue to have a balanced budget.
The warrant article would actually state contingent on a
Yeah.
positive vote at
Right.
a
It would have to
election.
pass both.
Right.
And again, to your point on, well, my position is I don't think we're ready for a 2.5 override discussion yet, because I haven't seen anything, and there's a lot of data to come in. I'm not opposed to a 2.5 discussion at the right point. One thing that I will say is, I want to see that the school and the town are working in the most efficient manner on things where there's overlap. I've said this my entire time on this commission, that I'd like to see facilities and maintenance run as, under one leadership. I don't see the reason to have two facilities directors in a town as small as ours. I'd like to think that we could properly give the DPW the resources so that they could remove snow in on both school property and in town property. And guess what? If you're not getting down the streets, you're not getting into the school. So I'd like to see that those things start to get looked at for efficiencies. The days of being inefficient for convenience, I think, are behind us, so.
Although I am new to the Finance Committee, I have to agree with that. I think there's a more creative way to look at the finances and the number as a whole. What does the town have for money, and how do we slice that up? And I think, of course, there's going to be disagreements between us, this is more important or that is more important. But I certainly think it's worth revisiting when you're talking about the topic of cutting teachers like we were last night, and how this budget is going to impact the schools and the children. So I think looking at it as a whole does make the most sense. And I do agree that we need to start looking at all aspects and all avenues of how can we consolidate costs, or what is the most important as a whole. So I would like to dig more into that myself.
I will add that at this point, neither the town nor us has received any sort of a formal spreadsheet or budget from the school department. I don't know if the school committee has received anything yet, but at this point, she's still, as far as I know, working the numbers and waiting for some information to come in. So I would also reiterate that while it's good to have it in your back pocket, this is not the time to do an override. At least not yet. Doesn't mean don't prepare for it and don't plan for it, but it's certainly not the time to start the process as the only viable solution. There are other solutions out there, I think.
And also to that point, whenever you're going through financial reviews, there are drafts upon drafts upon drafts to get to that final conclusion. And it does take conflict and conversation to come up with what is right. And not just for a municipality, really for any numbers and any budgets. So I think putting out all of your questions that you have, all of our questions that we have, residents and how this is affecting us as a whole, whether you have kids in the school or not, is what helps us as a town obtain the information we need to say, okay, this is what our focus is. This is where we really need to concentrate. This is what the majority of the people in the town of Lunenburg are concerned about. And it helps us pivot where we need to, or in our position as a finance committee, it helps us advise.
But Ed, I'm sure it's compounded as well by the loss of a finance director at the school department. Since November, I'm sure that has hurt the superintendent substantially in preparing a budget at this point.
The other thing just to say is, we have a question and answer session here today, but we're all volunteers here that have other professions, so the fact that we fumble around with some of the answers is just indicative that we need to go get the answers for you, so have some patience on us.
That's why I have stars next
Yeah,
to them.
and-
Those are the ones I really don't know.
And yes, we are idiots to that extent.
Last night I was talking to somebody, and I think she actually said it in public too. This is probably more than just a this year, next fiscal year's issue. Inflation had, we have more things coming up. Maybe insurance is going to be an issue next year also. So this might be a multiple year kind of thing. 2.5% increase in revenue and bigger than 2.5% increase in expenses just to keep us stable where we are with the same level of programs, not even expanding anything. So these are things that we have to think about, maybe not over 1 year, but over multiple years.
To continue your thought, I wonder if, even if now is the time to consider the conversation as to whether or not on the town side, our facilities director or maintenance has the capacity.
Yeah, no, and I think as we go through their presentations and maybe they can ponder that question and we come up with a way of balancing our budget.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we went with a 2.5 override, maybe that's still a good thing to do because, but
We wouldn't have 2.5-ton dump trucks falling just below the Capitol line then. Mandy Levine, go right ahead.
Hi, thank you. First, I just want to say thank you. I know you guys are volunteers and you're learning as you go along and working on this as hard as you can. Also, I live at 163 Island Road. This is hard for me. I have so many questions. I haven't been as involved as I want to be, and the more I hear, the more questions I have, and the less time I have to say them the way I'd like to. But something that I just sort of heard, I think, in this meeting, and then again in the school board meeting last night seems a little bit contradictory. So something I hear this board saying is, well, we don't have the budget yet from the superintendent from the schools, and yet the superintendent says, well, this is the budget I have to work with. So among all of the questions that I have, which I have pages at this point over just the past 2 days, I feel like that's my most pressing question, because it seems like everybody has a job to do. Everyone can only say so much because of their job. But it feels like there's a lot of questions and things being unsaid that's really hard to figure out as somebody who's trying to follow along. So who sets the budget? Who is saying this is the budget? That's the number one question that I feel like I have. And then something else I heard that I feel like goes with that is we have less available revenue during this growth period, and but our assessed value is higher than our tax levy, right? But what the town decides to do with this money is up to the town. But who is that? Is that the town manager? I'm just trying to figure out who is saying, right, we don't have this financial director, we have the town manager. What's her job versus the financial director? And what, I think there's so much wrapped up in all of this. I would love some clarity around some of those questions.
Thank you for those. Madam Town Manager, do you want to start?
I can start. So the charter outlines the town manager's role in the budget process, and the town manager is tasked with developing the budget and presenting a preliminary budget to the finance committee around mid-February. And from there, the finance committee reviews all the budget presentations with each of the departments, including the school department. And a final budget presentation recommendation is made at the end of the process, and there's a public hearing process at the conclusion as well. And I believe this year it is March 28th is that public hearing where all the presentations culminate with the public hearing process. And the finance committee and the select board each individually take votes on recommendations for the articles on the town meeting warrant, including the budget article. So it is a collaborative process. It has to start somewhere. We start with a target number because Proposition 2.5 limits raising our taxes by 2.5%. So that is the target number that is given the beginning of the process for the school budget.
So besides the school budget, can I also ask, like, who sets the tax rate? Is that also the town manager?
No. So I think if you caught Evan's beginning of his presentation, how the revenues are all calculated. So we start with our revenue projections for next year, and we're limited by the 2.5% for tax levy and additional new growth, and that's a calculated estimate that's added on for any new construction that we think will be realized during that period. And that's our base for our tax levy amount, including debt exclusion numbers as well, because that's outside the 2.5% levy as the way it was voted. And the tax rate itself is a whole different process. This year, it's a little different than the normal year. Usually it's in the fall, right before our fall town meeting. And that is based on, number one, this process that the assessors take for approving valuations. And that gets submitted to the DOR for certification. And then there's a tax rate setting process that's a tax classification hearing, which sets whether it's a single rate tax rate or a split tax rate. That's what the select board decides on.
So effectively, the state sets the 2.5%, which then goes to the town manager to distribute to all the department heads to say 2.5% is what you can go over from last year. And then it's up to the department heads to actually come up with their budgets to try and fit within that 2.5% increase to their bottom line. Mr. Franco, you want to add on?
Yes, thank you. Lou Franco, 250 Arbor Street, former assessor. I'll cop to that. Current select board member. I think I can add a little color to this too. Of course, I wouldn't expect otherwise. Everything the town manager said was completely accurate. But just to break it down and maybe into a little more bite-sized pieces, is that the levy is sort of like the size of the pie that needs to be raised. Then the total aggregate valuation of properties within the town is determined. And then from there, the rate, if it's all going to be a single rate, is really just essentially a mathematical exercise. It's not like people sit in a room and say, what should the tax rate be this year? It's a mathematical determination. What does the tax rate need to be? And it's a rate per $1,000. It's varied from, $14 per thousand to $22 per thousand over the last several years anyway. And it's really a purely almost a mathematical operation at that point. The classification hearing, as the town manager alluded to, it determined whether there's going to be a split rate or a single rate. The split would be between residential and then other types of things like commercial, industrial, things along those lines. So commercial industrial, for example, we do a single rate in this town. We have traditionally, meaning every entity pays the same rate, including commercial and industrial. When I was on the Board of Assessors and even afterwards, there's sort of a sweet spot that until you're the proportion of your tax base coming from commercial industrial approaches something like 20%, you don't really gain the value from having a split rate and assessing commercial industrial at a higher rate. What you'll do if you do that too soon is that you'll chase businesses out of the town, and then you'll be putting more burden on residents. So it's a bit of a tricky balance. There's sort of a critical mass of commercial industrial that has to happen before it starts making sense to assess them at a higher rate. So when not to go to Facebook because that is not the authority for sense all the time.
Sure it is.
But people say, why is Walmart and why are Hannaford getting a break? They're not getting a break. They're paying at the same rate. People say, why are they paying at the same rate? This is the reason. We don't want to chase businesses like that out of town. We want to encourage more commercial industrial activity, but not too much. And only when you get it to be, right now we're at about 10%, I think. About 10% of the revenue comes from that. You want to get it to around 20 before you even start thinking about assessing that at a higher rate, because if you lose commercial industrial, somebody's got to pick that up, and that's going to be the residents, private residents. So that's all.
Thanks. Mr. Beerbohm?
Again, Peter Beardmore, 282 Pleasant Street. And speaking for myself, I do want to offer a little bit of empathy to the previous commenter. Early in my tenure on this committee, you think of budgeting as like, okay, I make $100,000 a year, I pay 15 to 18 in taxes, my mortgage is this much, I have this much for food, and you have a number that you can start with. And that is not the way it works here. And it's mind-boggling to realize that, but as just described, the town manager's budget does not come out for a few weeks, and we're already having serious arguments about how we're going to appropriate things in the school department. And the reason for that is that these numbers don't sharpen until not just after town meeting, but after the beginning of the fiscal year. The legislature is not going to pass their budget until the end of July, best case scenario. So a lot of this is the best you can do with the information that you have when you have it. The reason why you don't have numbers, and again, I'm speaking for myself, but the reason why you don't have numbers from the superintendent right now is that we're looking at fairly big areas of numbers, right? And when you say you're going to cut a position, you don't actually know what the dollar value of that position is for a number of reasons, such as pending retirements, such as bumping within the union rights and all of those various things. And so we're having conversations right now about potential trade-offs and minimizing impacts, but that they're at a much higher level than this particular thing is going to save us $47,004, right? We don't know that precise amount. It's, everything is sort of within a zone right now. And the reason why we have to have those discussions now is because by the time we have enough information about the amount of money available, it's going to be too late. Like, we will not have reasonably had the time to figure this out. So this isn't the kind of thing where somebody sitting at home is going to say, but you're saving $40,000 over here and $20,000 over here. Why aren't you doing that? I would love that to be the case, but unfortunately, it's just not the reality that we're dealing with given how municipal budgets work. And again, this is just my opinion, but it's informed by 3 years of sitting on that stage and almost 2 years on the school committee. It requires quite a bit of patience. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Levine, does that come anywhere close to answering your question?
A little bit. I'm not sure if it comes close to answering it, but it gives me a little bit more information, so thank you.
Okay. Do you want to ask anything else? You have some more time if you would like before we move on.
I don't think so at this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Of course. Shoshana.
This is actually Joe Muley from 139 Cove Road. I'm Shoshana. I don't have, I'm not on the screen. So here's my question. I'm going 36,000 feet here. And as a I heard that, that you have the budget you have the levy, and that's going to be the thing that determines how you're going to put your budget together. So my first question is, why is that the policy? For instance, if you're only using the levy every year, that's a regressive tax on departments because their fixed costs go up every year. The budgets in towns are so far exceeding the levy that it's almost impossible for a town to keep up because insurance, fuel, capital. So it's interesting that the town, as a policy matter, says we're going to only go up to the levy because you're not even providing level services at that point. You're approaching a level budget, which means that departments have to find out how to rob Peter to pay Paul to maintain services. So when's the last time the town had an override?
I don't think we've ever had one.
Not to interrupt, but we have.
We have.
This is Nancy Gilman. In the early 90s, I lived in town. They closed the library. And I remember as a child writing letters to my selectmen about opening the library. And it passed.
30 years ago.
So there you go, 30 years. So we do levy up to the limit. I looked at that as well. Going back the last decade or so, we have our levy limit that we've been able to levy up to. We've been nowhere other than exactly at the levy limit, other than maybe a % under about 8 or so years ago. We're typically within $10,000 of our levy limit, if not right at it. So we are only allowed to levy to that amount. And you're right, this was passed in 1980, and it really hasn't been updated since 1980. So there's a perfect email to send off or phone calls to send off to legislatures. Perhaps it's time to revisit Prop 2.5.
So this is what I'm frustrated about with what you're saying. First of all, I want to thank you guys for serving. It sounds like some of you people have served for a very long time, and I'm not there doing the hard work, so it's easy for me to sit on my couch and say the things that I say. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you recognizing. But you are hiding behind the law, Prop 2.5. You are not limited to spending up to the levy. you could have an override. Are you telling me with inflation going up ahead of the levy that you're not having overrides? That is nuts. You cannot run an organization if costs keep going up and you don't raise your revenue. You're always going to be cutting something or departments are going to be suffering. You got union contracts are going up. They're generally going to have a COLA or a step that are going to be above the levy, and you're mandated to cover those costs. So that means if you don't raise the levy or you don't have an override, that money has to come out of another department. So I understand what you're saying the law is, but you're not shackled to that law. You don't have to appeal to the legislature. You have to have the political courage to put overrides on. It's not your decision. If you're making the decision, I don't want to do this because it's scary and the town won't want it, that is so patronizing. Put it on the warrant and let the people vote on it. Put the scary numbers out. And why is the budget starting so late? This should have started in November, you would have had numbers. I mean, if the public hasn't even seen the budget and we're asked to take your word for it, like, that's just not good. If we have to wait until the budget comes out, it's so close to town meeting, are you going to be able to make changes to it? So you have to have your warrant ready. There is absolutely no good reason why you wouldn't put an override in front of the voters. You represent the voters, you don't decide for them. You can make a policy decision that says, no, as a policy matter, we won't go above 2.5. That's not the legislature's call. Don't hide behind that. It's your policy decision that you're going to have a regressive tax on your departments, and your departments are never going to get caught up. And wages are going up, right? Wages are going up everywhere. Are your people paid a fair rate? Do you experience turnover right now? Are people anxious to come and work for Lunenburg? Is it good enough to just get the bottom of the barrel to apply for stuff? So the policy should be, how do we make Lunenburg all it could be? And not, well, we're going to base our budget on 2.5. Well, guess what? In our houses, which is what somebody said, I don't have a way to increase my revenue, but the town does. I can't put an override in my household. You could say that's what credit cards are for. But an override is absolutely within the town's jurisdiction. And if you look, the fact that you answered the question that we've never had one is very scary. Very scary. Just look at inflation since the time it was to now. Every year, compounding. And all you're saying is, well, we're only going to do 2.5%. And so, you know what happens? People get punished. Schools get punished because their budgets are too big. We don't like that big budget over there. So we're going to, hold them to 2.5%. And look what it's doing to the school. Parents aren't happy. Parents aren't happy. And now you're going to have an outflow of people telling you how happy it is. And let me tell you, if you keep coming back to 2.5, I'm going to be at every meeting to tell the people that that's not limiting us. That's you putting out a narrative that says you have no choice. You do have a choice. You're choosing not to face it. Put it on the warrant and override and let the voters decide. Don't be afraid. Have political capital and put a warrant on. When's your warrant due, by the way?
So
when is your...
I'm going to stop you there just so I can address some of the questions, actually all of the questions. First off, I understand your frustration, and I am in agreement with most of your frustration. I will remind you, we're an advisory board. We have no authority in the town whatsoever. We don't put articles in, we don't make the budget, we are here to look at the budget. It's not up to us to make an override. An override has to be an article put into the warrant, which anyone in town can do. There's nothing stopping anyone in town from a citizen's petition. The warrant articles are submitted by departments or by the select board themselves or the town manager. But we as a finance committee have absolutely no authority over the levy. We have no authority over the overrides. We have no authority. The only thing we have authority over, I believe, is a line item transfer within our own budget.
Yes.
So I understand, and the override question is not a question of whether or not we should do it. I agree that there is a difficult time that we're going through where we are underfunding, we are underpaying, and we are losing employees constantly. We have a number of open positions that we've had open in the town for months now. And it's primarily because our wages are low. And we have, as far as I understand, there is a study going on, which I'm sure will come back and say, hey, your wages are quite low, you need to redo them, which is only going to add more issue to it. So the idea of an override, it could be a reset. I could see it as that. Towns do it. It's a way to say, hey, we've been underfunding for so many years. We're now way down here and we need to be up here. So we bump ourselves up and then we start this whole 2.5% again. And well, 30 years later, we do another override perhaps.
You guys don't have authority.
No.
The Board of Selectmen has I understand that, but it's not your authority that matters. I'm not asking you to do this. You have a position of influence. Right? It matters if the Finance Committee says something publicly that I think the town should be considering an override. Right? So you have no power, but you have influence. You are in public meeting sessions that you could be saying that, and that at least somebody in town has sense, even though they don't have the authority. And the warrant articles, generally, that warrant is the Board of Selectmen's. And to say that the residents would put an override on as a citizen's petition is just laughable. The Board of Selectmen need to support an override. And I'll tell you, there's a wave of people coming who are starting to get boning up on this and realizing that the lack of vision by the top leadership here is they're just missing all this stuff that's happening around them. And it's going to catch, your property values might not be the same after you're cutting the school so much. That affects everybody, whether you have kids in the school or not. So I would say, use your influence. You don't answer to them either. Are you appointed or elected?
We are appointed.
So you're appointed by the Board of Selectmen, so you are beholden to them.
No, we're not.
No, we're not. We're appointed by an appointing committee that's made up of one member of the Board of the Select Board, one member of the school committee, and the town moderator.
Use your influence, guys. You're the smartest people in the room here. Thank you for your service.
That I'll absolutely dispute. We are not the smartest people in the room.
I think we are.
As far as the budget process, it's been a point of contention for every person that's been on the finance committee that I've known, but it's difficult. The governor's budget came out today. 20% of our actual budget comes from state aid and cherry sheet offsets. We won't know what those numbers are for another month or so. It's got to go through the House, it's got to go through the Senate, it's going to get changed, and then we might get we usually don't get the final numbers until sometime in the summer. So the understanding from the town manager is working within the assumption that there is not going to be an override. She tells the department heads in the late fall, early winter, here's the plan for this coming year, let's start working on the process. And they have to predict what's going to happen over the next few months and wait for all of the other stuff as well. For example, we just found out today, and the town manager may not be happy about this, but she sent an email, so I'm okay with it, that we are no longer receiving our 40S grants funding. We are not going to have so that's another $300,000 that we're not going to have in this budget season. And that was just levied on us today. So it's a moving target that we try to stay up with. And this is why we have these meetings and this is why we have the budget season. But again, it's,
But here's the thing, you might not have all the information. So departments should be handing you 3 budgets, a level funded, a level budget, and what they want and need. It should start with what people need, not what you're willing to pay for. And that's a huge difference. That's a lack of vision if you're gonna just say, it's only gonna be 2.5%. Departments should give 3 choices. And so if the town manager says, this is what we're gonna do, and it doesn't include multiple budgets from the department, that's essentially saying, this is the policy of the land, and I've just determined it. So there just is so much information that it sounds to me, you don't have to wait on these things. Every town deals with this. So there's nothing unique about Lunenburg. And the budget process starts much earlier. And people get to comment and all these things much earlier. And so the fact that it's coming out so late, I find really disagreeable. Because the time is crunched. It's got to get on the warrant. So how much change could actually happen?
We really appreciate your comments, and I think that your advocacy and your points are valid in a lot of ways, but to change the dates on when budgets come out, that's not as easy as it sounds. And I personally, I would love more time to assess and review as a volunteer on this board so that I could really dig in, like I said earlier. But to say that we're going to be able to persuade or influence the powers that be to put budgets out earlier this year in the situation that we're currently in is just not our reality. So I think long-term goals are something we have to look at. I think all departments, and I very strongly believe this, should be looking at historical data on how money has been spent over time and what we're looking at now. I think there needs to be more of a long-term plan on how do we review this, how do we get the town more involved and excited is the word I'm using, excited about being a part of Lunenburg and having a voice, even if it is a controversial voice, to speak up and say, this is what's important to me, and this is where I feel the fund should go. And again, not everyone's going to agree across the board, but the only way that we're going to become a community that makes those decisions together is participation. So I think that you've brought a lot of really good points up that we all really need to think about. But right now, the current situation is, as Mr. Chair has said, we've just received numbers today. And
No, I understand.
in the
I
last
understand.
couple of meetings that we've had on Finance Committee, I think it's been unanimous across the Finance Committee that we've been concerned about the school committee getting us a budget, 24 hours before town meeting is the proposed date at this point?
Before public hearing.
no, 24 hours before our presentation with them.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Realistically, that's not a lot of time for us.
That's my
And
point.
And I don't disagree with that point, but it's what we have to work with currently. That doesn't mean that we can't do better in the future. And it doesn't
you
mean
will.
that we're not advocating for more time. And, you know, we are, like, I'm new to this board, again, so we have fresh faces, we have people that have experience on the Finance Committee that are now gone over to the school committee, and I think it's important for all of us to hear one another out. So in effort to try to hear everyone's points, please attend the next Finance Committee meeting, please do attend the next school committee meeting, send emails, do research, like I absolutely encourage you and everyone else to be more involved in the town that you live in. So,
May I say one more thing?
thank you.
May I say one more thing?
Sure.
There was something that this gentlewoman, well-spoken, frank, transparent, said that really disturbs me. And that is this idea of the powers that be. The powers that be are the residents. And you are residents. You are the power. So don't distance yourself from that. You have 2 things going for you. You're on the Finance Committee and you're a citizen. So you have the more rights than the town manager does. to tell the town what direction you want the town to go in. And you're right, it's water under the bridge this year. But it was at a crucial time that wasn't fixed earlier, that we find ourselves at our weakest, having to deal with something that is definitely not advantageous to the Finance Committee. I'm not criticizing by the way, my frustrations aren't with the Finance Committee. It's why isn't the Board of Selectmen, and you can't answer this question, and the town manager, why are they unwilling to get you numbers sooner? Because they can. They won't be the real numbers, they're gonna fluctuate, but that's the point. You have to have 3 scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your encouragement.
Any other questions, comments from anyone else?
Rhonda Lucia, 181 Reservoir Road. Is this like the end of the meeting, public comment, or?
There'll still be a public comment as well.
Okay.
This is just a question and answer
Because
portion.
oh, okay, then I'll wait till the very end.
If you'd like to, you can go now. I don't mind. We always like to hear from you.
If there's no one else.
There's no one else.
Okay.
You have the floor.
I just wanted to say, I appreciate the comments of Mr. Passios at the beginning of the meeting, speaking about the emotions from the meeting last night. I had the same takeaway from that meeting. I feel like in times where we're faced with adversity or troubles, and we all know everyone is struggling financially. Well, I shouldn't say everyone. I know I am. So I feel like that's the time when you have to be more stoic and look closer at the numbers and figure out what's the most reasonable path forward. And I don't think an override is, I won't say think, I will not support an override of any kind. And the best reason I can think of is that 30% of our population are senior citizens. And I will not vote to increase their taxes. It's just not going to happen. Especially when we're looking at, we just had to spend $300,000 to keep the roof from leaking over the school administrative offices. We have serious problems in this town. There's stormwater. We had a municipal feasibility study a few years ago. Stormwater was #1 on the list, our greatest vulnerability. And we're not putting nearly enough money toward that. So, and as far as my property value goes, I'm going to tell you straight out, I couldn't care less what my property value is until I go to sell my house or if I was looking to borrow against it. And those are 2 things I'm not looking to do. So I just think this 2.5 override is crazy, and I'm hoping that this committee and the select board and people who have actually followed town government will take a more measured, calmer approach. I know I'm getting upset right now, but calmer approach to the numbers. This is a number problem. The only way to solve it is with numbers. Thanks.
Can I ask a quick question? And feel free not to answer. I have no idea if this is even legally possible, but would you support an override if it was worded in such a way that didn't touch fixed incomes?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Because then I would be voting against my own best interests, and I'm not a fool.
Fair enough. Thank you, Ron.
Can I just say one thing, just real quick? You know, there's been talk about overrides, and the people who we've been hearing, I was at this school committee thing last night, and I saw a lot of people talking about that, and they, almost unanimously, those people were talking about an override of some sort. And, you know, and I'm not sure how many people on the board over here or people in the audience are supporting that. I know one that isn't. But the question is what about the rest of the people? I mean, right now, we have the ears of the people who are interested in the schools, which is a large group of people. Should we hear from the people who are interested or not interested in a 2.5 override? I think if somebody starts on that process, we will definitely hear from them. And that is the way democracy works. One vote, one person, and that'll be the right way to go. Where if there is a 2.5 override and it's defeated by the town vote, then that's the right thing for the town. Not that I personally would like it or dislike it, that's the way it is. So I think this is an opportunity, because we have time now, we have a little bit of time, to hear from everybody, not just the people who want to save this position or that position in this school, but everybody. So keep your voices up.
I kind of want to say that I think that the talk of a 2.5 override is interesting to see whether there's kind of a political appetite for that. But, you know, we've got 2.5 months of discussions and hearings and everything else ahead of us. We have the 20% of the budget that is state driven, you know, those numbers coming in. You know, the whole thing on what health insurance will be, what's the millionaire's tax going to bring for us? That was supposed to be a windfall to save everything. You know, so there's a lot of unknowns at this point, which is what I'm getting to. And that's, I think everyone is doing what, you know, the previous speakers had talked about, is they put forward their most likely budget. But every year we hear about, if we had more money, we would want to add a fireman. If we had more money, we would want to, you know, add an additional truck into the DPW. We've had those discussions. We started capital planning back in October, September. So this process has been going on for quite a while, and as soon as the process starts, it almost kind of starts up again in the thinking phases, so. But ultimately, I think it's way too early to lock in that the 2.5 is the answer, because we just don't have the data yet to work through that. We haven't pondered through it. You know, and I think it's got the attention of everyone in town that kind of drives through this, right? The select board's here, the school committee's here. I've never seen this many Zoom people on a FinCom meeting before. Like I said earlier in the meeting, our public hearing is usually 2 people. And we take them. Yeah, one of them joined again. So I like the fact that the town has taken the interest in this. It's obviously the #1 item this year, after last year being the opposite. Taxes are too high. And I like the fact that people in town are engaged. So continue to be engaged, continue to ask the questions. As you go through the hearings, as we go through the hearings, continue to ask questions, either through us or at public comment. I know not everyone likes to speak publicly. You can funnel those questions up through us, you know, through our emails, or, you know, if you see us at the library or at a sports event or something like that, so.
Thank you. Lou?
Lou Franco, 250 Arbor Street. I was not called out by name by any means, so I'm rearing my ugly head voluntarily. I just want to clarify that I'm receptive to the idea of discussing Prop 2.5. I'm not out there advocating for it. I also do think it is an absolute last resort. But also, and people that have followed the select board meetings know that I've said this multiple times, I haven't used these exact terms, I just came up with the term. I'm a radical democratizer, meaning that I will, as a matter of principle, democratize and platform any question upon which reasonable people can differ, even if I am against the measure in question. In other words, I have signed petitions for laws out in Hannaford to get them democratized and put on ballots, even knowing I think they are completely insane propositions. I will get them on the ballot, and then I will go out and vociferously argue against them. It's the principle of democratization that I stand for. In this particular case, I might be very receptive. That is a fair characterization. I do robustly support public education. It would be a very, very last resort. But as far as my actually supporting Prop 2.5, but I might very well vote to put that question to the people and then vote against the Prop 2.5. And speak against it, maybe. I'm just saying, I'm a radical democratizer. That's all.
I think you have your re-election campaign slogan. You have your re-election campaign slogan all set.
Have you trademarked that?
You're assuming things.
Any other comments?
We trademarked that.
Yeah, exactly. Any other comments from this recent discussion?
Fight the power.
I guess the only thing I'd like to say is, again, like some of the other members of the committee said, that, these are new waters for the Finance Committee, and I thoroughly enjoyed the back and forth tonight. And I'm sure we'll be looking to do some more of this in between all the other stuff we need to do between now and April. So, as everybody else has mentioned, be involved, get engaged, and we'll have people at town meeting that will be much more aware of what's happened in the past 4 to 6 months leading into town meeting. It's always, I've been at this for a while, and it's always concerned me that we spend almost a whole year prepping for this season and then going through this season, and we talk about things and we hash things out and we throw ideas back and forth, and then we get to town meeting and we have 25 people stand up and ask the same question. Did you think about this? Did you do that? Did you even consider this? If you were engaged at this point in the process and continue through town meeting, you will know that we've already done that, or you've brought it up to us. So thank you for being here.
To add on to that a little bit as well, again, thank you for everyone for jumping on here. This is honestly more than I expected, so I'll take that. But I will re-emphasize what my committee members have stated about staying active in the process. It feels like town meeting is next week, but I promise you it's not. There is a slog of work to get through between now and then. And it's going to be hundreds of people working, 100-ish people working through it to get us there. But the downside is when we get to town meeting, we have just about 13,000 people in town, and under 200 people will vote on our $50 million budget. And that's been the case for years. So I'm hopeful that the kind of the groundswell that's starting in late January can maintain all the way through until town meeting and into the elections coming up. But I encourage people as well. I'm happy to keep Q&A sessions on here throughout the process, just to keep the public engaged. We are accessible. Most of us are on Facebook, although we won't necessarily talk about shop on Facebook. We will certainly try to point you in the right direction. But our emails are also open as well. And just in case people start dropping off, we do have the town manager's preliminary budget presentation, which will be on the entire budget for what she has, is February 15th. So that will be here, that will be live, and we will have that open and available for everyone to see. So that will be your first snapshot, at least from a categorized, not the line item detail, but from your kind of 15,000 foot detail of each of the line items for each of the departments on a very preliminary basis. And after that, we start meeting with each of the department heads, and they'll go through their presentations and advocate for what they do, why their funds are what they're asking for, what they need, and it kind of gets into that whole, this is what we have, this is where we would like to be, and this is where we need to be. And it's a good opportunity to interface with them as well, for advocacy reasons, or just so we understand what's going on in the town a little bit better. We do have a public hearing as well. It's March 28th. There will probably be one after that as well, the week after, because there is enough time to get one in there before we have to have our final votes done. Again, I encourage the town to be there for that one. At this point, for myself personally, I am against an override. I think that, as I think Mr. Menard just said it, last year taxes were way too high. We were facing a debacle where we had primarily people around the lakes coming forward and saying my property value has more than doubled, or my property taxes have more than doubled. And we had seniors that were having to sell. And now we're talking about increasing taxes all across the town potentially. We don't have the budgets, we don't have numbers yet, we have preliminary numbers, and that's the process, that's just how it is. We are in this situation, this is how every situation is. It's actually gotten better since the town manager has been here. From my understanding, we used to get budgets even later and even closer to town meeting. Under Mr. Beardmore, we at least got ourselves 48 hours. Heads up. I'm pushing for 72, so we'll see if we can slowly back that off. But it's the fact of the matter that there are a number of moving parts. It's not even just the town, it's the state portion as well. There's a lot going on, and it's very difficult to nail numbers down, and it's very difficult to plan when, as I just said, we're about to lose $300,000 that we were anticipating having. Actually, it's over $300,000. And that's going to affect the budget as well. So that has to get planned for. But I'm encouraged by the discourse. It's good to ask the questions. It's good to push the envelope, I think. And I look forward to more conversation as well. Before we wrap up, are there any other questions or comments that anyone would like to make? Over Zoom, in public, or in person?
So there was a hand wave, the fourth down to the left.
There it is.
Chris Sullivan.
Is there, just a curiosity, of those grants that we are losing, is there a reason we're losing those grants? Is there something the town should do, or citizens should do, or need to advocate for those grants in the future? I'm not as familiar with those, so just curiosity.
So I, as well, am not super familiar with it. Like I said, we got an email from the town manager just this afternoon informing us. Oh, and she's on and would like to talk. Go right ahead, Madam Town Manager.
Maybe she doesn't want to talk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a new development, like the chair said, that I informed the select board, finance committee, and the school committee and relevant staff today. We were notified that part of our cherry sheet aid, which is local aid from the state, we receive funds, it's called 40S funds, because the town adopted a smart growth district many years ago, and that made the town eligible for reimbursement for certain funds related to that district and students within that group to Lunenburg schools within that district. The program and how the law is written is that it's a reimbursement program. So they collect the data from the Department of Education, Registry of Motor Vehicles, the town regarding motor vehicle information and property values for that district. And the DLS, which is the Division of Local Services, does their calculation using the formula as prescribed by the law. And when they did that calculation this year, we were no longer eligible. And so I'm learning more information forthcoming. I will share that with everyone once I know more information, but that is the notification I received from the state.
Thank you, Madam Town Manager. And just for notification, it's $342,192. Not a small chunk of change. And we've been receiving this for at least back to 2015 as far as I saw, so I'm sure it's been going on since then. So that's going to be followed up through with not Senator Cronin, but Mr. Cronin at DLS. Different Cronin.
And our delegation, I made a call today to Representative Kushmarek, and I will be notifying our entire delegation on this issue.
So I would say, if you would like to, feel free, reach out to the delegation. There's nothing stopping the public from reaching out. I encourage it, actually. And historically, we've actually had them come in and talk to us as well. I haven't spoken with the chair of the select board yet about that. We can see if there's time to squeeze that in over the coming weeks. So that would be helpful too. Any other comments about that one before we move on to another question? Excellent. Any final questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you, everyone that participated and everyone that's actually joined on as well. I really appreciate the conversation and the questions. I will get back to those that I have notes to with answers, for sure. And from there, let's move on to our next set of new business, which is a town grant writer. So 3 of us attended the Municipal Massachusetts Association conference, the MMA conference, Tiffany, Dave, and myself. And there was a decent amount of it pushing towards state funding and available funds that were just sitting there unused, untapped, and begging for people to use it, to spend it. And I actually there were actually a number of people that got up and asked questions who were town grant writers and asking for more information about how they can continue getting this done. And again, while we don't have the authority to do this, we can certainly push for recommendations and start the conversation for whether or not it would be prudent for us to actually hire a full-time grant writer in the town to be serviced out to the school department for additional funds, to the parks department, to green communities, to whomever. But I wanted to at least have this conversation and see if we want to come to some sort of a consensus. We can certainly follow up with it later on, so feel free, anybody.
Yeah, I fully support this. We did talk about it during the weekend conference, and we all sat with, at different tables during the meals, which was fantastic, because we got to sit with other members of committees and select boards from all over the state, and we all have the same challenges, some bigger, some smaller, many smaller out in Western Mass. But I sat, I think it was breakfast on Saturday morning, excuse me, with the folks from Shelburne and I've forgotten the name of the little town right next to it. But anyway, their challenges have been huge with the Police Reform Act. They've had to merge their police departments to make that work. Their water supply comes out of the Bridge of Flowers. That is all torn apart right at the moment, being reconditioned. But one of the gals that was sitting with me is the grant writer for those 2 towns. And they're nowhere, the 2 towns combined are nowhere near the size of us here in Lunenburg. And they have a grant writer that's pulling money into the town. Grant writers traditionally pay for themselves just in the sheer numbers of dollars that they bring to whatever entity that they're writing the grants for. Also, in many grants, there is an administrative piece that dollars are attached to. That covers administrative costs to apply for the grant, as well as, in some cases, supplementing the income of the grant writer itself. So there's many ways to structure a position for a grant writer, including doing it through an outside service, maybe initially. There's an infinite number of ways to do it, and maybe ease into it versus a fully full position with full benefits. But I truly believe it will pay for itself. Not only with state grants, but connecting through the state to federal grants. I made a phone call yesterday to the State Department of Energy Services, Energy Resources, and believe it or not, I got a call back 35 minutes before this meeting this evening and had a 20-minute conversation with that person to help us get in the pipeline information-wise as the grants are coming out of the federal programs for recovery. The one I'm looking at in particular would probably be, the information would go through Green Communities and our Facebook site to notify the citizens that these monies will be available for energy efficiency grants, and they go directly to the homeowners, this particular program. Coming out of Washington in this program nationwide, $8.8 billion just for this one program. Coming into Massachusetts, they are in the process of putting the application together now. I believe she said $77 million just for the Massachusetts piece. So we need people in the pipelines watching these things and making sure that we don't miss out, and a grant writer would be doing that. Thank you.
I'm hesitant to call you Miss Menard, but Miss Menard, I've been told not to refer to you as that.
That's okay. I do prefer to go by Karen, but you can call me whatever. Karen Menard, 672 Page Street. Sort of wearing my Parks Commission hat, sort of wearing my resident hat. I just want to chime in a little bit on the grant situation. I have also been a supporter of having a grant writer for town, but I guess I want to make sure it's understood, especially since I've heard the Parks Commission grant application stuff being thrown around a bit, that this hasn't been a one-man show. Yes, I have done a lot of the legwork, but I have had help. I've had help from our chair, Anna Lockwood. I have had help from our contracted vendor, who in this case, I don't know if that's the word I want to use for them, but our landscape architect, Wola, they were hired to come back on to help us with pieces of this grants. So even with a grant writer, there may be other pieces of it that grant writer can't do alone. And some of them are technical pieces. I was obviously very heavily involved in the schematic design process and all the steps of Marshall Park, but there were still sections of that grant that were very technical that I didn't know how to answer. So, even with a grant writer, it's not a guarantee that grant writer would be able to do 100% of a grant, so there could be some other outside costs. I don't know either if other towns all utilize, like if other towns that are applying for lots of grants, do they only have a dedicated employee that is a grant writer, or are they contracting it out? Because maybe it's a possibility if, there's a master list of grants that each department wants to apply for, that maybe they could be contracted out. I don't know what the final answer is. I do think that grants are worthy. I don't know what the best way to be expressing what I'm trying to express is. I didn't expect to jump on to make this comment tonight. But I just want to make sure you guys are aware that even though we're applying, the Parks Commission is applying for grants, and it's been a lot of work, but there's been multiple people involved. It's not a single person that has been able to pull this off. So just keep that in mind, that even with a grant writer, there may be other pieces to the puzzle that need to be filled in.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, and I have to agree with you that, it's not this one person, in an office by themselves, writing grants, getting all kinds of money. This is more of it takes a village. It's a collaborative effort, and that collaboration is needed. It's boots on the ground, doing the research. Sometimes it does mean you have to spend a little bit more money in order to be eligible for grants, and although I don't have the experience in municipality grants, I do understand grants for economic development for small businesses and even larger businesses. So it does cost something, but I do think that it would benefit, and I do also agree with what Mr. Passio says. You know, the benefit to having a grant writer and what is available for the state of Massachusetts and also federally, it could really open a lot of doors, so to speak, for the town of Lunenburg. I love sleep, but I don't really do much of it. So I was up for 3.5 hours reading on mass.gov all of the different grants that are available. And for someone, you know, such as myself, that's an overwhelming amount of information, and I don't even know where to begin. You know, can I wrap my head around a lot of it? Sure. Do I think there's a lot of positive benefit for the town? Absolutely. Do I know the first thing about obtaining it? Not at all. So hiring a professional, I think it would have, you know, a lot of value to us, you know, in that area. I also want to go back and comment on the MMAs. That was incredibly informative. I am absolutely new to municipal government. I joined this board for several reasons. One of them was to learn. And, you know, as a person, as a mom, I've focused, as a professional also, I've focused more on federal government, state government, and I haven't really dug into where I live. You know, I've attended school committee meetings when we first moved here for years and years, and wasn't really sure how to assert my voice, you know, and what my position could be. So right now, I think I encourage anyone that has the ability to go to the MMAs to go. The networking, the talking to the people, it's not just a learning experience, it's motivating, it's encouraging. When you sit down at tables and they say, you know, we were able to get this done for our town, we made positive change. It makes you feel like, you know what, I can make a difference other than just sitting there and asking questions and understanding what we do as a town. It gives you new ideas, it gives you fresh perspective. And I plan on attending next year. And again, I really encourage anyone that's able to go to those conferences.
The trade show swag's pretty good, too.
And I got a cool squishy lobster hand toy.
I got a fantastic pen with a light on the top. It's really terrible swag.
Any bottle openers?
No.
No, come on.
Any discussion on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we should be putting town money towards the, you know, identifying and writing grants. I guess we got to figure out what's the best means by which one does it. Is it a grant writer, or maybe it's a grant coordinator writer, and then additional money for help in doing so. But if there's an ROI on it, I don't know why you wouldn't, you know, make that investment for that return. So, again, it's probably a select board, with two of you here tonight, discussion with town manager ultimately as to whether to move forward with this recommendation. You know, but from a finance committee standpoint, you know, we focus a lot on the expenditure side. This is a recommendation towards the revenue side.
And I don't want this request to minimize what the town manager has done for us as a town to bring grants into the town, as well as members of elected boards and appointed boards. Conservation Commission in particular, I can think of. We've had trails grants come into this town through their efforts of applying for grants. The Parks Commission, with their Parkland grant that they were just granted $500,000. There are folks in this town that have put in the time and the energy to try to bring money in, but there's so much more out there that we can tap into.
I agree with that, and I also, this is my third meeting, but it's become very, very clear that the town manager wears many hats, and in no way is this, you know, to discredit any of the effort that she's put into the town, but something that I've personally learned, and I'm still continually learning, is you can't do it all by yourself. So she shouldn't have that on her to have to obtain all of those grants. She is the town manager, she's not the grant writer. And again, it goes back to that collaborative effort. You know, it takes a village. So I think we need to hold hands on this one and all work together so that we can build that revenue, so we can better advise on expenses.
I agree.
Anyone else? All right.
Do we
Karen?
need that as a formal vote, as a request from this board, or will we just move it forward, or
We
how?
could make it a formal vote. I mean, it's a non-binding vote.
I agree, but the town manager always says it never hurts to vote.
If someone would like to make a motion, I'm happy to entertain it.
I will make a motion
Would you like to
Do what?
to hire
Where
a
are we
grant
moving?
writer. To hire the grant
To
writer.
recommend.
To hire or
Recommend, to
Recommendation.
recommend. Thank you for your help.
to recommend a grant writer to the town?
It's my first motion for the record, but yes.
All right, then I'll second it.
All right, so I believe the motion was to recommend to the town manager to or to take up the consideration of hiring a grant writer, and the select board as well.
If I may, could I request a slight addition to that?
Sure.
And ask, have this go to the town manager and select board?
Would you like to amend that?
I would like to amend that. I think that's great.
In that case, I'll second it.
All right, so the motion is now to recommend to the select board and the town manager both to recommend a consideration for hiring, or at least looking into a grant writer. All right, any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're unanimous. Fantastic. Thank you. Feel free. So we have no minutes, and I'm inclined to skip the next two topics because we still have people on the call, just to make it down to public comment, because they already had a late night last night, and a late night tonight is another one. Does anybody have any issues with skipping committee reports or topics for future meetings?
The only thing very quickly, make sure I get this right. Next Monday evening at the library and on Zoom, Green Communities will be meeting. Kelly Brown, our representative from Green Communities, will be there. And a number of the department heads in town have reached out to us. We'll either be there physically or on Zoom, and have a list of projects that we're going to be kicking around to see which ones are appropriate and which ones may not be able to be put into the system for the next couple of rounds.
Is there a Green Communities grant for solar on the high school?
For what?
Solar on the high school?
Solar on the high school. I can't answer that.
It was on Facebook, so I figured I might as well pass it along. Somebody suggested it, and I thought it was a good idea.
There's already solar panels on the middle high school.
Is there?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. There's the answer.
Hmm.
We need a drone. All right, upcoming meetings. So, I have not checked with the town manager yet. Madam Town Manager, how are we looking for February 8th for a financial forecast? Is that doable, or do we need to kick that to the 15th?
If I can get back to you on that.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it on for now then, for February 8th, to still have the financial forecast. But that may be moved, so I'll send a note out to the committee. February 15th, again, is the town manager's preliminary budget presentation, so that will be town-wide. It will not just be one department, it will be the entire omnibus budget. And then we start on the 22nd with our department head meetings. Tentatively, we still have the school department now coming on the 14th of March. We've moved back to the 14th of March, tentatively. To have a presentation from the school department. It will not be voted on by the school department or by the school committee at that time. About 99% sure that it won't be. So they will still be voting on it on March 20th, and then we will have them come back on March 21st to update us if there are any changes to it. But I've expressed that we are fine with 95% of a budget on the 14th, with the small changes on the 15th, or on the 21st, if there are different numbers coming out of it at that point, just slightly different moving numbers around. The bottom line should still be pretty consistent. Again, the town warrant is currently open. It was opened on January 9th by the select board. It closes on March 18th. I believe it just requires a conversation with the town clerk to get that process started if you're a town petition, and she has all the information. That's Kathy Herrick. Our scheduled public hearing is set for March 28th. We will probably have another one the week after, and our recommended report for the warrant is due on April 2nd. That's just due to the town manager, so we can have it printed in the warrant, and I think this year it's going to probably be a good one to have in the warrant. I'm happy to discuss when we get closer to that. It's going to be interesting to see where we land. It's going to be some conversation. But again, that's 2 months away, 3 months away.
Can we hire an annual report writer?
Well, we have a clerk now.
Here.
Our first task can be to write a report. Annual town meeting is May 4th. So that will be at the middle high school at, I believe, 9 o'clock in the morning.
Will probably be the first sunny day of the spring.
Probably so. I encourage everyone to attend. The more the merrier, honestly. And then the town elections are 2 weeks later on May 14th. Roughly 2 weeks later. 18th, good Lord. It's already it's 9:30, it's my bedtime. All right, with that, I'll move over to public comment. Is there any public comment from the committee before we move on to the public?
Good.
Fantastic. Any public comment from the public?
Susanna Marcucci, 245 Sunny Hill Road. And I will say this is my first time ever speaking for being in this town for about 4 years.
Welcome.
So thank you for having me. And thank you to the committee and all the work you do. I am speaking as a parent of 4 children in the district, so I do want to go back to the budget for the school, and as a higher education professional as well, an educator that's been in education for more than 10 years. And as someone who works in higher education, I see students coming in from the K through 12 system, and they're not prepared for university, especially now after COVID and all of the educational losses that our children have experienced. Now is not the time for austerity. It's the time for investment in our future. And I'm not saying, because I don't know and I'm not an expert and I haven't looked at the numbers, but we do need to consider all the options to make sure that the school has the funds that it needs to provide our children with the best education possible. So whether that's redistributing funds and looking at where we can pull money from other areas in the town, or deciding as a community, we're going to invest in our children, and that's okay. We're going to take some money out of our pockets in order to make sure that our children have the teachers that they need, have the mental support, the mental health support, the counselors, the athletic options. It's really, really important, and it's not just an issue for parents, right? It's the responsibility of the town to educate children. That's just the way our government is set up, to run education largely from the local level. And I think it's a great opportunity as a town to say directly where we want our taxes to go. We don't get to do that at the state and federal level. You know, we elect our representatives at the State House and in Congress, but we all know that things are not necessarily happening the way we want them to, but we really can make an impact at the local level. And so I would just urge the Finance Committee as a body to really consider this, and whatever way you see fit to get the funds to the school, that you do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and as a fellow parent, I just want to say our kids are not our 9-to-5s. They're our heart and soul. They're our whole life. And it's very deeply personal when you're talking about, or we're having discussions about budget cuts and how that is going to impact our children. And I implore you to go to school committee meetings as much as you're able and say that as much as possible. The superintendent of school oversees the budget process. And yes, there is a committee there helping her, but I think there's power in numbers. And I think that that needs to be heard. because we can advise on the school committee's budget and what the superintendent is recommending, but I think the more that we speak as parents about how this is going to impact them, it will help them understand how to allocate those funds and get a little creative and move those monies around so that the children are not losing deserved support, so that they grow to be successful adults. And then once that hopefully hits this table or our laptops, we have the time to consider and review and analyze and make suggestions and further support people. So thank you so much.
Mr. Sullivan.
Hi, Chris Solo, 108 Highland Street. Just wanted to say thank you. Thanks for the Q&A, keeping this open tonight, giving everybody an option to come and ask questions and hear more. I'm seeing comments on Facebook that people are finding this very informative. So I just wanted to give a note of thanks for hosting this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, one more quick comment. We're encouraging you all to attend meetings. There are going to be an awful lot of them. As I said, we start meeting weekly, and if we get backed up, we'll be meeting twice a week through this budget season. But just be aware, if you're not familiar with the recording process for all these meetings, they are recorded either by Zoom or PAC, and they are uploaded to a YouTube channel. So if you miss a meeting, to fill yourself in on what happened at that meeting before you get to the next one, you can run those meetings back on YouTube and get caught up. Just wanted to remind everybody that you do have that option. Thank you.
You can also run them at 1 1/4 speed, too.
Yeah, that's the best part of it. You can skip over anything you don't want to hear.
When Mr. Beermore comes up, just skip ahead.
Fast forward.
Any other public comment from the public before we wrap up?
If you are ready, I move we adjourn.
I'm happy to entertain a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Anybody want to stay later? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, it is 9:27. We are adjourned, and thank you, everyone, and good night.